back where I started again.
Special players make special plays on special days.
Trying to forget you was just a waste of time.
Tim Micallef, come back. I have on the line with me right now a guy who I think the OUA dearly misses. I know certainly football players around the league do. It is Tim Micallef. Tim, how are you this morning?
I thought for sure you were talking about somebody else. I appreciate the sentiment nonetheless. Good. How are you?
I'm great. I'm glad I have you on. I've been trying, like I said to you earlier, playing phone tag with you for about a month, I think it is, because you're a guy of interest I had when I wrote a little blog piece that I wanted to get a hold of you and talk to you about the OUA a little bit, but more just life, because I think your show is awesome on Sportsnet. Tim and Sid, that airs Monday to Friday, 1 to 4, and I wanted to talk with you about some stuff, so thank you for joining me.
Not a problem, Marshall. Anytime, except when we're playing phone tag.
Yeah, exactly. Phone tag's no fun. Just, one tag, you're it, and then let's get back down to business.
Right.
I know that you're used to that game, though. People want to blame Sportsnet, blame the NHL deal, all these different things. I'm not interested in blaming or playing the blame game. I just want to get your thoughts as a guy who has studied and lived OUA football off and on now for around 10 years. Why do you believe there's no consistent audience of substantial numbers for CIS football?
I think it's a bunch of different things, Marshall. And I think it's easy to just say, and I understand, I completely understand why people want to blame one spot or another for not doing it.
Right.
I get why people are upset. I'm upset that it's not on anywhere. I'm upset that I'm not calling the games. But one thing I will say that kind of disturbed me about a little bit of the public outcry that came when things went down was why Rogers and or the Score gets the blame when they've invested over a decade into it.
Yes.
And someone like TSN just walks away even though they have just as many. I mean, there's 10 channels between the two networks. It's obvious someone can put it on.
Yeah.
It hurt a little bit that the blame was placed in the place that I work, the place that a lot of people really, really care about the product and have shown it for a decade. That aside, the consistency in the viewership. I mean, I think the biggest thing is culture.
Right.
I think the biggest thing is...
Don't go on a Leafs rant here, Tim, please.
No
changing of the culture.
No, there's no changing of the culture. But I think it's just the culture. I think, we don't get... Okay, so we watch American college football, and I know you're a big fan of American college football, and I grew up watching, college football both sides of the border. And for me in the building of the product, I always thought, why can't we get 10%? Our country is 10% the size of the U.S. We have roughly 10% of the teams that they have there, if you want to count, Division II and so on.
Right.
And yet, we can't produce 10% of the audience on hand or on TV. And that always frustrated me. I didn't understand what the difference was. And in studying a lot of different kind of aspects of why people watch sports, the best reason I can come up with is, one, people are fans of the sport. Two, they enjoy the atmosphere.
Right.
And every Canadian that I talk to who says, I love college football, and I say, well, how many games do you go to in Canada? And they respond to me, none. They say, well, I love the atmosphere down south. And I say, well, why can't we recreate the atmosphere here at a lower scale, at a 10% scale?
Yeah.
And the answer to me is always, well, the chuckle and the I'm not sure. And
it's the most ridiculous thing they've heard. And
Yeah. And to me, it was almost like, it's almost a microcosm of the Bills in Toronto. Like, if everyone knows that the atmosphere in Buffalo is so much better than the atmosphere in Toronto, and yet 10 to 15% of the people who are going down to Buffalo are from Southern Ontario, why can't they just create the atmosphere at the Rogers Center?
Yeah.
Why can't they create the atmosphere in and around there? Now, there's extenuating circumstances like price and things of that nature that I fully comprehend. But it's kind of this attitude amongst Canadians. Well, they just do it better down south, so let's just enjoy it down south instead of trying to recreate it here. And for me, I think that's the biggest part, because you turn on an OUA game at home, and you see 4,000 people spotted through a stands, I think you lose a lot of the credibility right away, no matter how good the football is.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big part of it. I think if we packed in, if we saw what we saw in those highlights from the Panda game over the weekend, where there's a big crowd and they rush the field, and it feels a little bit more real, then I think that's the battle that we've got to fight. And the chicken and the egg kind of come together when it's TV and live event and going down and enjoying the atmosphere.
Yeah, I think that the thing from my perspective we need to turn up is the Panda highlights. The thing we need to turn down is getting Canada West receivers running into the uprights. It put on Bleacher Report.
Right.
As little as we can, because those type of things might send the wrong message. But like you're saying, there's no lack of stars. There's tons of interesting characters. We just saw Larry Haler and Neil Lumsden go into the Canadian Football Hall of Fame.
Right.
From their university playing days. There's such a great base here to move forward and try and grow the product, but it seems like it is such an uphill battle. I remember specifically when I heard that Sportsnet wasn't going to be airing the regular season games. Now, to clear it up, you are doing the national semifinals and the Vanier Cup on 360, but you campaigned last year a bit on game weeks. I remember on Tim and Sid saying, please come out in large numbers. You saw the crowd at Mac and Windsor, Panda game. Let's sell this thing out. Let's get it big. Were you kind of campaigning for crowds because you knew that you had a feeling the coverage might be pulled if the product didn't really change?
I didn't have that feeling, but I knew the numbers.
Right.
And the numbers last year were the lowest they've been in years. And part of that has to do with Sportsnet not understanding the product as much as the people at the Score did, because they had put 10 years into it.
Yes.
And the other part of it was Sportsnet not having to care as much as the people at the Score did for 10 years. If you remember, the Score didn't have many live event products, so each and every week an OUA game was like a Super Bowl for the people at the Score, right? And I say that like, you chuckle, but that was the truth. Every person who worked on that broadcast treated it just as well as anyone would treat an NHL game on TSN or Sportsnet. The people who were involved, a lot of them either played or worked in or came to just, enjoy all the good things that surrounded CIS football. And I'm not just going to talk OUA because I think, part of our idea back in the day was to do a Canada doubleheader, whether that was starting an AUS game early and an OUA game a little bit later, or an OUA game early and a Canada West game later.
Right.
There was like every week the Score felt like this was their Super Bowl. So there were stories throughout the week on the players and the interesting personalities that you're talking about going into each and every week. And I think that was huge. And I think that people underestimated just how big that was. Now, Sportsnet started putting stories on Connected, and I think that helped. But it just, the momentum for whatever reason, and it's on the same channel, so it's not as if, the Score became Sportsnet 360 for those who don't know. It's not as if the channels switched or the time changed or people had to go find it. The numbers just dissipated for whatever reason. And, it went from a time where, at our peak, we were averaging around 60,000 viewers per game in the OUA,
right,
including the Yates Cup one year, which was our best year. And if you put it in perspective, it's probably, a little more than half of what a Raptors game does. That's a success story.
Yeah. And
last year, those numbers had dwindled, in and under 20,000 a game. And for the life of me, I can't figure out what that was. And I know that the one thing that helped when we did the 60 number, there was no hockey.
Yeah.
And Jesse Lumsden was in a record hunt at Mac, and there was a bunch of things that came together that made it, almost near perfect. And I think that might be, and whether or not the hockey thing at Rogers changed it, a lot of people are going to point to that this year, but there was no national hockey deal on Sportsnet last year.
Yeah.
and it confuses me, honestly. I don't have a perfect answer. I think there's a ton of things that we can point to.
Yeah, Tim Micallef joining Marauder Radio here on CFMU 93.3 McMaster University Radio. I'll tell you why it changed. When you graduate a guy like Kyle Quinlan and you put in a scrub lead coming in after him, the ratings, they go down. That's basics right there. But I was laughing about your Super Bowl comment also because it's our Super Bowl. Every time that we had the score coming in when the University Rush schedule would get released, every single guy in that locker room would just get hyped as soon as they saw a helmet that they thought was familiar, or they'd see, even our games that weren't on, we'd see a matchup that we really liked. I'd see Western Queens at Queens Homecoming, and we go, oh man, as if we have to play that day. I want to watch.
Right. Yeah, I don't have an answer for it, and I think that I feel like those dents were made, and for those who don't know, I left the Score for Sportsnet without knowing that Sportsnet would buy the Score 6 months later. so there was a near emotional goodbye when I left, and one of the things I was most proud of was the dent we made with the players. And I really think that the Score's coverage of the OUA specifically made a dent in so many different spots where guys like yourself, guys who were recruited at a high level, may try to wander down south and go to, like a Graceland or a small D1 or a D2, just looking for the hype that came with going down south and bragging to your friends that you're going to an NCAA school, instead stay home. And kids from, BC and Alberta, instead of going to play junior football before going to university or trying to get that Western Washington scholarship, were going to the OUA because they knew that they could play on national TV and that their parents could watch them on national TV. And I think that the television deal in Quebec has shown that. A lot of those kids, at Laval, a lot of the high-level kids at other schools could definitely go D1 scholarships, but they're staying there because they know it's big time in Quebec, and they'll be on TV each and every week. And if they go to Laval, they'll be on TV probably, more than they ever would even south of the border.
Yeah, that conference has thrived through the television partnership they've had there. But
and the numbers have. You should see the numbers. The numbers are monstrous.
I can imagine. I watch the French CBC games sometimes when I'm home on Thanksgiving. I remember watching a Montreal Laval game that was in French, and I don't know any French really since grade 4, and yeah, exactly. And I still watch that game just because it was like the production value was pretty good on it. But I wanted to ask you too, a lot of the guys identify your voice and commentary as kind of the defining aspect, like you're talking about, of their playing careers. On a personal level, does that resonate with you at all, that a young generation of Ontario and CIS football players kind of associate their athletic success with the ability to hear their name called by Tim Micallef?
Yeah, that's very cool. It was, the reason I got into it and cared so much was a brother of mine played CIS football. Now all my brothers were pretty good athletes, and I went to Carleton, and it was the final year of their football program, and one of my biggest regrets was that I didn't play university football, and I kind of, I'm not as good an athlete as my brothers were. I suffered a broken leg, torn ACL, separated shoulder in grade 11, 12, and we used to have 13 way back in the day when I was a kid.
And the triple header.
Yeah, the triple header. So I said, I'm going to focus on journalism. I'm going to focus on school and not play football. And I regretted it. And when I got the opportunity to do this, I thought back to, watching my brother. He used to be on CH in Hamilton.
Right.
And some great people were involved in it. Paul Hendrick, who now works on Leaf games, and all the great people, Kenny Welsh, of course, on CH. And I remembered how much it meant to, my brother, meant to our family. And I would always say, there are people at the Score who watch my career and they're like, why are you putting so much effort into CIS sports? Like, Batman Verk's gone to the States. He's on baseball. Why aren't you working? I'm like, there's something that you can't replace by doing this. There's something that you can you could do all the pro sports you want, but there's something different here.
Yeah.
And I think, as we watch what's going on in the NFL right now, and you think, man, I haven't seen anything like that in CIS sports. I don't see what I saw, I'm not going to big up Jameis Winston. We've seen stuff like that.
We don't have a long enough show for that.
We've seen stuff like that happen in the CIS. And it's not like we've never had our incidents in the CIS. I mean, Kyle Quinlan's one of the best guys that I've met through this thing, and he got into a little bit of trouble, whether it was completely his fault or not. But we've seen those scrapes before in the CIS. And I just, I'm so proud of all the kids that I've met like yourself and what they've become and what it is that just being a small, tiny, minuscule part of it is something that meant a lot to me for various reasons.
Yeah, and it's always meant a lot to the guys too in the locker room. I know there's been lots said about that, but I'll do a couple of.
And that's the ultimate compliment, honestly.
Yeah.
I'll say this, and maybe some of the players will get pissed off at me, but the parents are first.
Yep.
The parents always meant the most to me. Like just talking to the parents and seeing, thank you for doing my son's game. Thank you for keeping me up to date.
Yeah.
Thank you for providing the injury report when I was sitting at home in Kingston and couldn't make the trip down the road or things like that. That always meant the most to me. But the players' response and the players' love was huge.
Yeah, the parents are always the judge and jury, and you understand you understand that now as a parent yourself.
Honestly, getting chirped by a parent is the toughest thing you'll ever hear. Because the parents will chirp you if you get it wrong. Never mind the pronunciations.
Yeah.
Thank
Sometimes
you,
get
Liram Hairulali.
Yeah, get hung out on the names. Thanks a lot, Liam. A couple of quick hitters for you. While you won't be covering the OUA week to week, you are doing the Vanier Cup. The Vanier Cup is in Montreal this year, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
What are you most looking forward to about a national championship in Montreal?
Can I say the nightlife?
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Although Quebec City is not all that bad. I think there could be the possibility of that being a very cool atmosphere. Last year I thought was really good at Laval. They supported it. There was a tailgate. There was a real feel. And there's the possibility in Montreal that if they get behind it, as you've seen them get behind different events, it could be really cool. Now, it could struggle there. There could be, if there's no Quebec team there, it could be an interesting draw. If there's a Quebec team, there could be and then Laval is an odds-on favorite to win, to go and win every year. And judging from what I've seen, watching those SRC, those games in French, they look pretty good again this year.
Yeah, they do.
It could be a really cool atmosphere in Montreal.
Yeah, I completely agree. When I heard it was at Percival Molson there, I thought that was pretty neat because I've never been there, but anybody I know who's played a game there, Mike Daly played for us, and he's with the Ticats now, and he's told me it's a pretty amazing environment. But favorite place to call a game in the OUA and why?
That's a great question. I want to say back when I worked with Dwayne Ford, who's now on TSN, my favorite place was Laurier because the place to call the game was about the size of a shower. And
what are we talking, like a large house shower or like a residence shower?
Yeah, but maybe like an athletic club shower where you could pull the curtain.
Okay.
So there's a little bit of room to move, but not much. But it would be myself, and I'm about 6 foot, 200 pounds. 40, who's about 6'2", 240, and our stats guy, who was a rather large fella as well, over 200 pounds at least, probably around 250. And we would squeeze into this box, and poor 40 to see the play. He would have to move from our side of the box to the other side, and the roof where the doorway was about 6 foot, and as I mentioned, 46'2".
Right.
So every time he would try to look to the other side, he'd smash his head, at least half the time. So Laurier for comedic reasons, and try calling a game after you've been concussed.
Yes.
And have your play-by-play guy laughing while hitting a cough button. It's tough to stay serious in good moments. So that's my favorite for bad reasons. And I guess I guess with all the new places, I mean, Max got the new nice booth. Toronto's got the new nice booth. But I guess, I mean, if we're going to talk atmosphere, homecoming at Weston's pretty darn good.
Yep.
And I would have loved to call this year's Panda game because that would have been kind of special.
Yeah, I was wondering about that too. The first thing I thought when that game happened, I was like, yeah, that would have been a great game to hear you call, because nothing against the guys that were calling it there and whatever it was, Rogers and Ottawa or whatnot, but there was kind of like, Carleton wins! And then just 20 seconds of silence. I'm like, can somebody just get a tape of Tim Micallef's voice and press a button and fill in something exciting here? Or like my cut up intro, but.
I probably would have went that quiet too, because there's actually an atmosphere.
Yeah.
And there was, forgive the stupid phrase because I know pandemonium, but there was just people going crazy, right?
We should have just pressed the Susie Waldman button and said something about Roger Clemens. That would have. The Pandas win.
I can't believe it.
That would have been perfect for me. Your favorite OUA football moment? Just one shining moment that you remember from calling a game.
Oh, jeez.
I know there's too many.
There's a lot.
That's okay. You can think of one quick for me, or you can press the pass button, which is allowed on Marauder Radio. And we can go to the next one.
I'll give you a Mac one.
Okay. That
pops to my head. And Mike DeCroce was one of my favorite guys because he had a great haircut. But there was a play against Western where I could feel like he had done it to them the year before with a nail in the coffin on a 90-plus yarder, and the situation just dictated that I could feel like. That maybe you guys would go back to the well.
Right.
And I think I called it just before it happened. And to watch it come to fruition on the field and see a guy, a kid that I liked, come through with the big play, that might be one of my favorite moments of all time. And there's nothing like getting a long touchdown. Jesse Lumsden breaking the all-time mark I thought was cool. I don't know if they still exist on YouTube, but Andre Dury had some of the most ridiculous runs back in the day. And if you get a chance, just YouTube Andre Dury.
Yeah.
And there's one specific one where he made about 4 different moves, and one I'll never forget where a guy just rolled his ankle. And it was like a crossover in basketball. It was just unbelievable move. So Andre Dury, there's 2. If you get them, there's one versus York, and there's one versus Waterloo where he was hummingbird-like in his moves, where it looked like he moved back. He did move back. He moved backwards, but it looked like he moved backwards without moving his feet, and then moved forward. And the guy trying to tackle him fell flat. So there are a couple that bounce out, but. It's funny, they're not really huge moments. They're just memories of big plays and fun plays to call.
When you think about when I think about you saying Andre Dury laid down a crossover, all I can think about is your and one mixtape voice of a guy just going, Andre Dury!
I should have done that. I remember. I think I did spit out Andre Dury's breaking ankles.
Nice. There you go. That's a go-to for sure. Usually you play a game on Tim and Sid that involves Donovan Bennett, who's done great work for the OUA as well. It's called Cutter Uncut. I had a full Cutter Uncut planned. We don't have enough time for it. But I would love to have you back and play Cutter Uncut. That's okay. But I will ask you one question. Cutter Uncut, me giving you horns from your own show on my show.
We don't own them. We do not own them.
But is it socially acceptable from Tim Micallef for me to give you horns for joining Marauder Radio?
We stole them off of dance hall reggae artists. You go ahead and use them. Damn, you got the actual horn.
Yeah, I had to cut him out from one of your actual broadcasts because I'm a techie. If you listen closely at the very start of this, I'm not sure if you can hear it. It's actually your voice because you spoke over the start of the horn, so I couldn't get a clean clip. Ready? It's like half a voice. You just hear Tim's booming voice, and then the horns come in.
That annoying dude just shut the hell up before we play that horn.
We will have you back hopefully sooner than later before the Vanier Cup National Semifinals to play Cutter Uncut, do a couple other things. That was Tim Micallef. He's on Tim and Sid Monday to Friday, 1 to 4, Sportsnet 590 The Fan, Sportsnet 360, Sportsnet.ca, the Rogers Radio app, the TuneIn Radio app. Basically, if you have electricity, you can hear Tim and his great work daily. Thank you so much, Tim, for joining me.
Appreciate it anytime. Sorry it was long-winded.
Excellent. Talk to you soon. That was Tim Micallef from Sportsnet.